Hey, Editor John here. These are actually polarized. I can't really see anything with these on. So what follows is my interview with Action Jake, who I had an absolute blast talking with, and I'm so glad to have met. He is the first interview for EngJam, or EngJam, an event I'm hosting this year, with just a few participants, myself included, whose goal is to work on game engines. As Action Jake is a developer that's worked on his own game engine previously, I think he was a fantastic choice to kick us off with our series of mentors. I have many other mentors that have agreed to speak with me, but almost all of them over correspondence. And I have to say that the fun and dynamic elements of a live interview were impeccable. Absolutely choice. I hope I get more folks on board for a video interview soon. All right, that's it. Enjoy the show.
And you go by Vice, right?
I do, or John. That's
Or
my
John?
my human name, as I'm called.
Awesome. I go by Jake as my human name. So
Okay. Well, we are. I probably should have adjusted gain before this, but hey. Hey, thank you so much for the time, Mr. Action.
of course.
How should I kick this off? Well, I'm here with Action Jake. Do you go by Jake as a human name? Do you have a GitHub handle? Is it JJ Wall? I was creeping you a little.
That is my GitHub handle. Yep. And then on Discord and everything, I'm Gizmolo, Gizmolo.
Okay. So, just to recap what we're doing here, I am very grateful for your time. I am asking everybody who I think will give me the time to provide some insight, some motivation, and some game developer peerhood and motivation for a thing I'm doing, which is EngJam, which is a game jam for the engine itself. I know not everybody is into using their own game engine, and that's great, but I think I've got like a couple of people that will be working on their own engines. That includes me. So thank you for the time. You're going to do a lot to motivate me, I'm sure, in the next however long we're talking. But very grateful for your time. Would you please open us up with an intro of yourself, your credentials, and your inspirations and quests to make it to where you are right now, and cap off your intro with like your present projects that you want to rep or that you're currently working on.
Sure, man. Well, appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you thinking of me to do this interview because this is exciting. This is fun to be a part of. But sure, I'll go into it. You know, I've been scripting games since I was 8 years old using Flash Player, ActionScript 2.0. Got into software development professionally when I was about 24 years old. I'm 30 now. So I've been doing it a little over 6 years professionally. Not doing game development, doing traditional software development, web development. Worked for 3 different companies. I've now found myself at a consulting firm, Deloitte, working on various government contracts, doing like military, medical related software, which has been really neat. It's been very impactful work. And it's really funny to see how my career's progressed because it's like, oh, I just want to make games. And then, oh, I happen to learn how to build like a multiplayer network engine. And all that knowledge transfer has completely helped my career and also the military. And here I am just scripting games. So I think it's invaluable what game development does across the industry. It's always pushing software and hardware. And it's one of the more complex things you can get into as a hobby and an endeavor. So it really pushes you as an individual to learn as much as you can and to build things you're passionate about. I guess projects I'm working on, you probably found me from my YouTube where I've put out a few devlogs about a project called Quest for the Kingmaker. And that is what I was saying. It's using my own full stack TypeScript and Node game engine that really it's meant to emulate .io style games, you know, like Slither.io and other games in that genre. And really, I wanted to build like an action RPG that's a really bite-sized experience. Someone can jump in and play for like 5-10 minutes and kind of get the full MMO tropey action MMORPG experience, but just, you know, in a bite-sized form, because we're all we're all now, us millennials are grown and don't have time past after our 9 to 5 jobs to play World of Warcraft like we did back in the day. So now I got to build a whole game just so I can have that same experience today in a bite-sized form. I guess last piece of that, I'm also working on an app game, a mobile game that I'm going to release to app stores called Rock Paper Showdown. I'm targeting a Q4 release this year. Really excited about that project. And that's built with Godot, so not my own game engine. But other than that, I think that's it for my intro.
Yeah, you're in a perfect spot to compare and contrast custom engines versus working on your own. But if I can link back a little bit to your childhood, what's like the games that inspired you to work on what you're working on now? And if you don't mind me saying, your game clips that I've seen on your YouTube channel give me a little bit of a MapleStory vibe, and and my wife says probably 3 or 4 times a year, "Man, I miss MapleStory," and I think what she really means is like she misses the time to play games like she did back when MapleStory was big, but also a little bit of that like that cartoony vibe, that fun you can drop into. So, what were your inspirations leading you to Quest for the Kingmaker as you're making it now?
Dude, great question. And dude, of course, MapleStory is up there as a huge inspiration. Now, I'll be honest, I never got super into it as a kid. I would get to like level 30 and then it's like this game's such a grind, I don't want to play anymore. But I hate to say it, that's kind of how I am with a lot of MMOs. I'm not like a min-maxer trying to be the first to beat some raid or dungeon. I enjoy the social aspect of it and the kind of like casual playthrough, but those exact type of games, MapleStory, something lesser known, Wonder King, Latel, those 2D MMORPGs straight from Korea that I played growing up. You find something free when you're like 12 years old, and I didn't have money or a credit card, so it's like that's really all I could play anyway. So, those types of games, for whatever reason, have just been lodged into my psyche. And it's those exact types of games that I've really been inspired to like want to recreate and bring back to our generation, but in a much more palatable form that, I'm not spending months of my life grinding to get to level 70. I can literally play a full playthrough in like, a 30-minute session or something.
Brilliant. And yeah, that sounds like a ton of fun. And mobile too. I know there's a little bit of controversy in mobile games coming out recently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at you, Blizzard, who seem to not really have the pulse on what people want to do on their phone for that little sliver of time they have to play games with. So do you have any guidance or any opinions on how to make a mobile game that respects players and is still fun and gets to the core of what the supercomputer in our pockets is really good for?
Dude, I think that's a challenging question, and I really don't think I'm qualified to answer, but, there's obviously a balance, because for one, these games that, like, they put so much effort, like, I think of something like Genshin Impact, there's so much goes in to make a game like that unfortunately you need some sort of crazy payment scheme to keep that game alive and keep it growing at the pace that it's growing. Now, I think they take it to the extreme where it's like, you got to pay $150 to pop pity and maybe have a 50-50 chance of getting the character you want. That's a little ridiculous, but take the money part out of a scheme like that and just look at the spark pity system for these gacha type games. I actually think it's an ingenious scheme because it guarantees, units and characters and weapons that you get. But I think it's like there's a balance. Like you could scale back how much it costs to get to that spark system. And obviously every developer is different, and the laws and rules around regulations around that is always changing up in the air, and really it seems like you can't really regulate it. So, gamers beware, gamblers beware. And to be honest, like I'm just now entering the mobile market myself, and I'm really doing this first project is exploratory, and I want to know what What is that right fit? What's fair to gamers, but also fair as a business model? Is there that balance? I don't necessarily want to do like a one payment $2.99 game if I'm going to get 50 downloads, but a free game if I get 5,000 downloads and I throw simple banner ads, like is that fair as long as it doesn't take a full screen and you have to wait for a 30-second ad? That's we'll see what the player base decides once I put it out, and I'm going to do some QA testing rounds, but it's a good question, man. And if you have an answer, I want to hear, because I think the whole industry wants to know.
No, I do not have an answer. You're exactly onto something, and I think especially for us, like real small time, you definitely want to be able to make back the money you spent on your servers, the money you spent contracting out art, and that stuff is not free, and all those people deserve to eat and get wealthier too. But I think there's a lot of leeway we can take back for the people playing these games. It doesn't have to be quite so exploitative. And I would love to hear more about your journey as you figure that out, because it's not going to be easy. It's definitely a balance, but
well, we'll keep in touch, man. I'll share my info if you share yours.
Oh yeah, definitely. And let's see, you got a lot of projects going on. How do you balance them? How do you balance them with work in your life? And do you have any kind of like anything about your workflow that you can share that keeps you organized and keeps the development getting cranked out?
Dude, great questions. And these are common questions that I ponder on, because I'm trying to find my own. I'm always kind of creating new systems to keep my productivity up. And actually, the way you found me was through Gamedev, Explosions.
Yep.
I believe, right? He gave me some incredible advice, which is like when you, because obviously like we do these things, especially it's a hobby for you, or is it full time for you?
Still a hobby.
It's still a hobby. Same for me. Like we do any hobby you take, doesn't have to be game engine or game development, it could be anything. You do it out of passion, you do it out of love. There's something pulling you towards it. But you have to be careful, because if you let your passion pull you to the extremes, that's when you burn yourself out. So even Splosions kind of coached me through, like, when you find a piece of like your project that you're working on that you can't wait to work on, what you don't want to do is just knock it out like all in one sitting. You kind of want to do like the little like feeding the rabbit approach, where it's like, okay, I got to do like an hour of this crappy work that I don't want to do, and then I'm going to do 15 minutes of this work that like I can't wait to do. And then you kind of like, that way it keeps the project moving forwards in the long term, and it keeps you in the short term not burning out. So that's one thing I've been practicing. Another thing for me, what my buddy calls the Kaizen effect, which I believe is a Japanese term for getting 1% better, is as long as you're doing something in your passion projects that you're goal oriented around, it's there's a difference between a hobby that you just want to do, like you just want to paint. It's like, okay, great, paint, and you don't have a goal in mind. But when it comes to a game project and you have an end goal in mind, you want it published to XYZ platforms, you have to keep yourself accountable to get the work done if you want to see that end result. So one thing that this friend has taught me is just doing the bare minimum. And sometimes that bare minimum is writing 10 lines of code. Sometimes that bare minimum is just merely opening up VS Code or whatever your code editor is and looking at your code. And if that's all you do for the day and that's satisfactory, then it's like, look, that's not a lost day. You did what you asked of yourself, and you can't go to bed ashamed. And I think as creatives, we often get into shame cycles where it's like, oh, I didn't do enough, and then that puts us in this, this hellhole of like, it's like this cycle that you got to get out of. And as a creative, you kind of have this internal mechanism that's going to keep going, right? The stallion theory. It's going to keep going and going and going. So if you don't have your creative sights locked on to an objective and you put that stallion to work, then that stallion is going to be worked against you, and it's going to put you into the negative side of creativity, which is often depression and anxiety. You hear Jerry Seinfeld from the show Seinfeld talk a lot about this. So to just wrap up the answer to that question, the thing that's been working for me lately, and you could verify this by looking at my GitHub, because most if not all my work is open source, is my Kaizen, my bare minimum is getting one commit in. And even if that's commit, like I'll commit my notes, like .txt files to my project. So even if that's me taking notes on my to-dos and what I got to do next, that's my bare minimum. And that's kept the ball rolling, because I've had a days or two that I'm like, oh man, I like the last thing I want to do is code after my 9 to 5, but I'm going to get my bare minimum in. And then guess what? The work keeps going, because it's like, oh, but then I can do this and this. And then 3 hours later, I've knocked out 3 hours of my hobby work.
Man, that's brilliant. And fitting in 3 hours of development after a workday is obviously not something you can do every day. And you got to have some mercy on yourself on the days that you can't do that. But,
Absolutely,
be excited when it actually does come up. So, and I did want to ask a little bit more about the job, not to get into details. I know if it's defense related, then we don't have to go into any too deep of details. But I did like something you said, that like game development does really push the boundaries of development far more than like your standard web application that hits a database type applications do, which they have like really reliable doctrine, and you don't have to be super creative, and you don't really have performance metrics that you really need to hit. Has the intensity of game development, the performance metrics, and trying to fit like 20 updates into a single second for your online server, refresh rate, does that skill translate into your day job, and what has it done to either benefit you at the job or set you apart from your coworkers?
Great question. And I should preface this by saying I really look at myself more as a developer than an engineer. And some people don't make a distinction. I do. I look at a developer as building on top of platforms to make things come to life. An engineer is doing that work you just described, like making things efficient as possible, thinking about all the various steps that happen in a single tick or single game tick, single frame on the client. So, and it's funny because I'm building my own game engine, and I've learned so much because I've been really challenged in that space of like really kind of pioneering into the engineering mindset to push my own knowledge boundaries. I still struggle with those things, like making things really efficient. I'm fortunate to have a really talented engineer, 2 talented engineers on my team that I can always go to when I'm struggling with stuff like that. But what I will say is building like the server client architecture for my game engine was profoundly impactful, not just on that project, but on all projects since, because it's helped my understanding of client versus server relationship like to the nth degree, where I already had a really good abstract idea of like, okay, this code runs on the client, and okay, this code runs on the server. But now I have a much better idea of like why that code should run on the client, why that code should run on the server, how I might architect the glue layer between the two to make it as clean as possible, as easily extendable, easily modular, and so on. But I have my things I need to work on as a coder, as a developer. Man, I'm terrible at algorithms. You put me on like a coding test, I'm always terrible. But like whenever I have an interview, like I just try and practice as much as I can, and hope to get lucky. Essentially, more of an artist than a coder.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, it's kind of surprising to hear that distinction between dev and engineer. I haven't heard a take like that before, and I like it. That's a pretty interesting perspective. I think that could probably help people like me, I'll just call myself out here, that struggle with fiddling with the details of how something works perfectly and not building your system out entirely. So I want to drill down on that a little bit. You have decided to work on your own custom engine a little bit. How did you come to that decision, And how did you kind of make a roadmap of what that entailed for you? Because obviously there's kind of like a minimum viable thing you can put together with your own engine, but there's also a whole list of features like, well, I could eventually do this, and the full spec of my game might include this, that, and the other thing. How do you decide what to work on, and how did that influence you to make your own engine?
Great question, and I did think about this question before this interview. So where I'll start is, I got my start with action scripts and scripting games back in the day, and that naturally migrated me over to JavaScript as I got older. And I guess I never really had the mindset of like, oh, I need a game engine to build this game. It was more of like, if I can render something to the screen, I can work out the rest. So a lot of my early projects pre my game engine and pre anything I'm working on today was really just like doing simple JavaScript, games where you're, using CTX to render, doing like CPU rendering to the canvas element, and nothing super fancy. Um, Only did it dawn on me as I got deeper and deeper to games of like what a game engine actually does under the hood, like handle so much of the rendering layer for you, handle so much of the physics layer for you, whatever it is, shaders, textures, and all that, where, me working on my own games, those kinds of things never really crossed my mind. I was making simple little like flash games that didn't call for all these like complexities that modern game engines use. So I say all that to give context. When I started working on my game engine, it was less of like, oh, I got to build a game engine. It was more of like, I have to build something for my game that I want to build. So it was always like I was building my game from the ground up. And it's really crazy to think about because I was working on the server client architecture for about 3 years, just getting messages to pass the way I needed them to, for like, tracking inputs from the client, sending them to the server, and kind of like building a framework around that. And it wasn't until about the 3rd year mark where I actually had something rendering to the screen. And by the time I had all that work done, it was kind of like, oh, I've literally been building a game engine. It's not just like I've been building a game. And it's awesome. And then at that point, like, I just bought into it, because once I got things on the screen, it's like, okay, it's go time. And then I really started bolstering the engine and thinking things through a lot more deeper. And then I will say, and I know you'll get into this question surely, but like, now that I've kind of been playing around with Godot, and I have a little Unity experience as well. It's like, oh my gosh, like, it's just, everything's so easy, versus what I was doing before, that it's like, wow, I can't believe I was doing all of that work on my own, when like Godot, I literally wrote like one line, and that might have been like a month of work, to get to that point in my engine. But you're not getting the full story, because there's a lot that happened. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm going to build my own like game engine. It was always dedicated for this project. And at some point it was like, I could have moved to a Unity or a Godot, but I was so far along that I was like, no, like, this is a fine project. I'll keep working on it. And especially for what I was doing, I was specifically targeting web platforms. Um, I didn't know of any like client server architecture framework or game engine that was already out there that I could have used. Surely I could have used something like Phaser on the front end and like Socket.io on the back end. And I think that probably would have worked fine for my purposes. But I kind of, again, did my own thing, used 3JS on the front end. And then I really built my own like socket system built around WebSockets on the back end. Does that answer that question? I know that was all over the place.
I think it's good. So,
Okay.
do you feel like what you ended up making in that case is actually over engineered or under engineered, or is it kind of a smack on for what you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember you sending me that as well. Parts of it certainly are over engineered, parts of it are certainly under engineered. And when it comes to like, okay, I need to build a library or like a module that's going to fit this purpose, what I've learned is like you really can't be too abstract from the get go. As soon as you start like going over abstracting your modules, you're immediately gonna start over engineering things. And I've made that mistake so many times. And it's like, you've got layers of interfaces, and then someone's trying to use it. You're like, wait, what does this do? And they're like F12 in the interface, and then there's like another interface, and you're like F12 in that, and like, wait, why? You know,
Yep.
and I know we're probably talking in very esoteric terms, so I hope your audience knows what I say when I'm saying F12. That, and for, I guess, for the layperson, that's when you like are looking at a method or an interface. On your code editor, typically F12 is a hotkey that goes to the definition of that interface or that method, and you can see what's going on under the hood. So that for any like aspiring game developer or engineer, like, it's totally practice. Like, you got to go through trial and error. These are hard things, I think, to learn the easy way. I think you have to learn the hard way for a lot of things. You got to over engineer some things. You got to under engineer other things. You got to be really good at refactoring if you care about your code base, because that's just the name of the game for good quality software. And yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing. And even to this day, like, masters still over engineer things and still under engineer things. You can only plan for what you know. And then when the unknown comes and reveals itself, it's like, oh, I could have extended it this way to like account for whatever. But you're never going to know until the rubber meets the road. So really build it for your purpose. If it needs to be, if you realize it, what I've heard before, actually, I think this is a really good rule of thumb, is whenever you repeat something 3 times, that's when you should turn it into a separate function, module, class, or whatever, like abstraction. But if you repeat something twice and you only need it twice, maybe a separate method for it isn't necessary. Maybe you just rewrite the code. That's okay if it happens twice. But as soon as it happens the third time, that's a good time to be like, okay, why don't you go ahead and refactor those other 2 occurrences to use this new method? And now you have one method that's being called in 3 places, and you can reuse it however you want in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So, repeat yourself twice. Embrace the refactor and just try it. That's the summary.
Yeah, I think that's good. And really, I don't think there's an easy way out. I think hard experience is the only way you're gonna, because it's really like you're feeling the code base. You're feeling how users might be using your code base.
There's not an easy way out. Well, thanks for that terrible news. No, the not easy way out is actually kind of the fun of this hobby. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Well,
again, like,
go ahead.
My main goal is to stop doing so much down in the weeds esoteric engineering and actually get more of a game built, which is probably kind of an ironic goal for someone who is holding a jam about game engines. But hey, I already decided to go down this road. I'm just trying to get to maybe not the end of it, but an exit with a clean looking gas station on the highway of game engine. Does that sound about right?
That sounds fair. And at the end of the day, I think you need to be doing what you want to be doing. Like, building a game engine is a very like noble quest to take on, and there's so much you can learn from it, and there's no reason not to do it. It's going to make some things harder, but it's also going to teach you a lot along the way. And there was someone, a connection I made in the industry, who owned a games company, and I would like kind of send him some projects and get his feedback from time to time. And a lot of it was like early Kingmaker stuff, and I'd send him things, and all the time he'd be like, dude, why are you building your own engine? Why don't you just use Unity or something else? Like, you're either a game developer or you're a game engine developer. Like, you can't be both. And for a long time, I was like, dude, no, he said, you can't be both unless you're a genius. Unless you're a genius. He said something like that. And he's like, you're also doing the art, and you're doing like, the S effects. It's like, man, like, where does it stop? And I think, I think he's both right and wrong. At the time, I was like, dude, you're wrong. And I was like, went at it harder. And now that I've kind of like, that's kind of something I haven't told you yet. I've been a little burnt out on Kingmaker, which is I've kind of moved to this mobile project to make things a little easier on myself. And Kingmaker's not going anywhere, but it's kind of the similar probably issue that you've been dealing with of like, man, you go down so many rabbit holes and you're like, okay, I got to build a chat feature and it takes like a month. And again, like in Unity or Godot, you drag and drop a chat feature and that's a half a second. So, you know, you got to know what you want out of it. Software is complex no matter how you chalk it up. It's whether you're building an engine or you're just developing a game, you're going to deal with tons of complexities, and hey, knowledge is power, so you can't hurt yourself by going down these rabbit holes.
And what it really makes me want to ask is, do you think that you would actually fully appreciate what Unity and Godot go for you without at least dabbling in engine design? You got to build the toy example at least to know what you're getting, how great the value is from a pre-built engine, right?
Dude, that's a great question. And just last night, I got a friend and mentor who's one of the most talented programmers, engineers, game developers I know, and he's actually an open source contributor on Godot, and he's been building the stencil buffer feature for like outlines and stuff on 3D models for the open. It's going to be super nice. You know, it's a nice API. It's easy to use, and you know, he's showing us under the hood. And you know, I was like thinking to myself, like, man, I have barely touched any shaders code. You know, barely any Vulkan, barely any GPU of any sorts. And it's like, this is just a whole new world that's opening up to me. And like, you know, and then you kind of get the imposter syndrome of like, and to think I'm a game engine developer, like I barely scratched the surface. But you're exactly right. I think that's the takeaway is, man, I can appreciate. Can I do what he's doing right now? No, I can't. And could I? Sure. If I went down that rabbit hole, sure. I believe in myself and I'm smart enough to figure it out. But no, I can't do what he's doing. I can't do what he's doing right now. And I can appreciate someone who does that. And I can appreciate using a tool like Unity or Godot that has all that work done for me. So where I can just make my nice little Mario clone or whatever I'm building. And yeah. So this is a great question. I think there's so many ways to like answer that.
So has your own engine come with any killer features or kind of like benefits, specific things you liked that you got to make it your own way, better than maybe Godot or Unity would give it out to the general public?
You know, I expose the entity component system really well. And like, I feel like in Unity, in Unity, I don't even know if they have an ECS, but I know they do in Godot. It's not like clear cut and dry that that's what's going on under the hood. For my game engine, like it's very clear cut dry. You got to know what an ECS is to like really use my engine, which I think is cool. So you're a little bit closer to the engine code. And then I built my own React layer on the front end, like completely from scratch. I'm having to use like Babel to transpile my TSX, JSX files into JavaScript. And so like getting all that set up was like, I learned so much. And it's not the best. It's got like laying out my UI through my React layer is kind of has some quirks that you got to know. But getting that working was really cool. And of course, I learned so much about React. I barely knew anything about React before I built React. I was like, I'll learn React by building React. And now I can like I look at React as like a godsend in my industry. It's like I want to build everything in React now. And before and earlier in my career, it's been an enigma. So like having that I think is really cool, even though it's like surely like other engines have similar UI layers, but not all. Like Godot doesn't. Godot doesn't have a React layer. You use like drag and drop panels and stuff like that. It's more of a node based system. So you know, I'd prefer to write my UI in React if I had that option. What else is in there that's cool? I mean, I really like my middleware layer. If you look at how I transmit packets back and forth, it's just kind of a unique way how I'm setting up the interfaces, and it's really easy to extend. So if you need like a new message type, like say the client sends an event to the server and then you process that on the back end or vice versa, that's really easy to extend. So I really have now at this point, I'd love for this project to like have open source contributors and like take this in a new direction than I've been taking it in, because I think this kind of project, like for people who are interested in building like .io style games, is a really good nugget to start. But again, it's a game engine. I really don't know much about like how do you attract open source contributors? Like what's the carrot approach? What's the stick approach? I've done a little bit of that with my YouTube of like, hey, my code's open source. If you want to contribute, come my Discord, come contribute. But I'm still learning, I don't know.
Hey, no crime in learning. That's one thing I realize is that you cannot just give up on learning once you're out of college or once you've got the job. It's constant improvement is the only way to not be left behind by the bullet train of progress that we're going through right now. So, well,
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
and I mean, you call that React. I want to know. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants. What libraries? What components? What either YouTube people, educators, anyone you can call out, software or human, that has helped you get to where you are?
Oh man, those are all good questions. I've had really good mentors at companies. I think the best thing anyone who wants to get in the tech industry could do is like try and land that first job and then just act like you're being paid to learn. So if you're not even getting paid that much, like pretend you're getting paid to get a 4-year degree or something. That's definitely how I treated my entire career so far. And like, every promotion or every pay bump I get, it's like, now I'm just getting paid more to learn. So, people that are personal in my life are huge. I'm weird the way I learn because like I'm not a big YouTube video guy in terms of like learning content. I'm not a big video content guy, and I'm historically terrible at courses. I've bought tons of Udemy courses that I've gotten like 5% of the way through. The way I learn is I just need to conceptualize it. I just need the abstract article that tells me why I should learn React. Like, why is React useful? Or why is React plus Redux useful? Why might you use Material UI over Tailwind CSS or vice versa? Those once I understand, React makes like building UI components really easy and like reusable and modular and extendable. Once that clicks, then it's like, okay, let me start this project and I'll do something small. And then I build that first project, and then it's like, okay, I got a baseline understanding. I'm going to build a bigger project. So I've always kind of had like project-based mentality when it comes to my learning methods. And unfortunately, and I actually think about that a lot, like I probably could do a better job of like crediting sources where I get my, because I literally just, scan through articles I find on Google, Stack Overflow. Man, I guess GitHub issues. I read through GitHub issues all the time now. I'm huge on open source, so I try and use open source everywhere I can. But I did mention some libraries. I love Material UI, and something called Paper. Material UI Paper I used for like a mobile app. That was really cool to use. Yeah, does that answer that question?
Yeah, it's a lot of great references. I don't do so much web and mobile development, so a lot of those tools are news to me. But hey,
Okay.
one endorsement can just help narrow it down when you're looking for a new environment to develop in, right?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll say Bootstrap is a CSS framework, which I started with, is great. But then Bulma.io kind of took over. I loved Bulma. I used Bulma for like everything for a long time. Since I'm in the React world, I've switched to stuff like Material UI, which is like pre-built components. They're so easy to use. You just slap them in, you resize them how you need to. You don't really need to style them. So easy. Anyway, I could go down that tangent, so I'll stop.
Well, Mr. Action, Jake, it's been pretty great 45-ish minutes. So thank you for your time. Do you have a call to action to sign us out with, to the viewers or to people who are working on their game engines in EngJam or just in general on the internet after this?
Dude, great question. I mean, for call to action, again, if game developers and game engine developers are listening, go get involved in game jams, which it sounds like that's exactly what you're hosting, right? Game Engine Jam. Go get involved in game jams. Game jams have been like the biggest um motivator for me to continue, like, learn things so I can, like, oh, Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare is a big one. That's like the competition that I participated in. It's like, okay, this is coming up. I want to learn Godot beforehand, so I'm ready to go. I want to learn Unity, or I want to learn this new animation technique. Like, it's always like, I always have Kingmaker or some other side project that I'm working on, and it's got its own milestones and goals. But it's always game jams where it's like, I need to learn the skill quick because I got to implement it in a 48-hour, 72-hour period, and nothing will teach you more than dedicating yourself to a game jam and putting in, 12 hours a day minimum, surviving off Mountain Dew and pizza. It's also a great place to network. Stuff like Global Game Jam. I know COVID kind of killed the scene, but I believe they're meeting in person in major cities again. And man, I met so many cool artists and sound designers and programmers at the last Global Game Jam that I was a part of pre-COVID. And I'm like, that's like one of my dreams, is to totally host a game jam would be awesome. But just to be a part of that is just an awesome experience. If these are your hobbies, this is what you're into. I couldn't heap more praise on getting a part of game jams.
Man, if there's an Action Jake game jam, I want to show up for it. And that's how I got into this mess. Is one of my favorite game jams is 7-Day Roguelike. Some of the projects coming out of that are just so incredible for 7 days of development. And me being kind of dumb, I would be like, oh, 7 days, huh? I can spend 2 days working on my engine, and then the rest of the time I can make a quick little game with the new features I developed. And then day 6, I'm now debugging the new engine features. I'm like, you know what? I just need to commit to it a little bit more and work on the engine part separately. So that's how this engine jam got invented, is my own distraction during other game jams. But thank you so much. Any other parting words or things to rep out, or things to call out that you're working on or that you want to share?
I guess I can self-plug my YouTube channel. So yeah, as mentioned, I'm Action Jake, at Action Jake on YouTube. I have links on there to I have 2 Instagrams. My personal Instagram's on there, Action Jake Instagram. And then I even have an invite to my Discord server, which is a really small community of us that are following some of the projects I'm doing, but also keeping other people motivated. I want other people posting their projects in there, and I want that boosted up more. So you're welcome to join. You can find that link on my YouTube, on the banner, my YouTube profile. Other than that, yeah, I'll have my first mobile game coming out later this year. It's going to be called Rock Paper Showdown. I'm really excited about that. So hopefully it'll be free. So hopefully people download it and like it. But other than that, man, I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate your time, and looking forward to what goes on with the Game Engine Jam crew.
Thank you very much. And, you can find me on the Action Jake Discord, too. I think I'll hang out for a while.
Yep.
Final question. You do a lot of interviews on your YouTube channel. How was this one?
Mm-hmm. Oh, dude, you did amazing, man. I think this is great. I recorded it myself, so I can put it on my YouTube if you don't mind.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. So thank you a whole bunch, and we'll just hit stop now. And just, thanks, man. Great to meet you. Great conversation. Can't wait to see where it goes.
Awesome, John. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Later, man.